There, we're back. Let me know, say something in the chat, again, that you're there. Okay, cool. So we got these two things, the dome light and the point light. We want to tint our point lights a little orange, so it looks like indoor light filaments. You want to put your point lights close to the lights that are actually in the ceiling. And you need to have some sort of dome light, and then some sort of portal. With the dome light, you can see that we have, this is just all white outside. One of the options here is that you could also have an image outside. And so we talked about Polyhaven before, right? Mm-hmm. So I grabbed an HDR from Polyhaven before we started, just sort of a general outside one. And let me load that. And so I'm loading this into the path here on the dome light, right? And yeah, we can see how that not only affected the color of light that's coming in through the window, it also put some sort of image out there. And then also that image shows up on our reflections as well, which will help just in general the realness of the whole thing. So those would be the two main sources. If you don't have walls and a floor, I saw some of you did not have walls and a floor. You want to have walls and a floor and a ceiling of some kind. That would be so that otherwise the light from the dome light will be coming in through the top a bunch, and in order to again make it just look better, that's going to help a lot over there. Make sense? One other note looking at this, like I just threw this sphere in here as a test. The sphere in Redshift does not do the automatic rounding that it does in the Cinema 4D render, where it would be like perfectly round. And so if you do have any spheres sitting anywhere, you definitely have to turn up the subdivisions on that for it actually to look perfectly round. A note about rendering. Let's test out some rendering stuff here. So someone asked this before. You've got to come up here and select Redshift. Otherwise, it looked all red. I don't know whether that was just her file. It happened to you too, though, didn't it? Right? Right? And then you switched it to Redshift, and it was okay? Yeah. Okay. So we need to switch to Redshift. Let's use. We come over here. And we have our bucket quality and denoising. We're definitely not going to need motion blur. We do want this box checked. Essentially, this means, do I want the light to bounce around and share color as it bounces around? And we do want this thing. And so let's start here and see if you're within your budget, right? And what do we determine our budget was? Our frame render time per frame budget. Yeah, 2 minutes. 2 minutes per frame. If we stay under that, that puts us in the 2 times let's say 1,000 minutes and yeah. So if you get to render 4 hours a night, right, that would give you 120 frames-ish. exactly, under 20 frames, right? So in that vicinity. And let's just see where we're at, just having some simple stuff in here. So I've got this in, I come in here, and I can test going to the picture viewer. Actually, when I'm just doing a test like this, instead of dealing with all the save stuff, I can just uncheck the save box and do a render. And so in the render settings, once we have global illumination turned on, you'll see that it will it'll sort of like make one image and then it'll make another image. And the first one is it calculating a lot of the different ways it can calculate global illumination, and then it'll go through and fill the image as per. And so here we can see we are at 25 seconds for that frame. Not bad. All right. You know, for having global illumination, everything turned on with the standard Cinema 4D renderer, we would be definitely slower than that, quite a bit, right? And so we're doing okay here with the settings on low. And so if we come back here, I'm glad they made these simpler settings. Let's look at those. And so here, redshift, if we go to medium, that bumps us up to 37 seconds a frame. So here's what we're going to do for Monday. In the interest of getting all of the shots together and having something to look at, because inevitably we're going to want to make some changes, is let's keep the redshift settings to low. And we should be able to get very, very quick output if we put it at
1280 by 720?
well, I was already at 1280 by 720, but before we've used 640 by 360. All right, and so let's see where that puts us.
Ooh.
7 seconds. Okay, and so this is something that'll be quick. Nikki asked in the Slack, I don't show people this anymore, but in Cinema 4D, you can not save as an image, but save as a movie. And no, don't do this. Okay, why? Because if your render crashes, and if there's one thing we've learned about Redshift this semester is that it's possible for it to crash. Not only possible, in some instances, perhaps likely. If you render as an MP4 and it crashes or the power goes out or your house gets struck by a meteor halfway through, then you'll lose the file, right? The MP4 will be corrupted and you just got to start over, right? If you render to PNG, or we'll use PNG because it's only data compression, then if something happens, you can look and see where it crashed, and then under your frames, you can see like, okay, I crashed at frame 200 of 500, and so now in here you can just say, okay, start at 200 and then end at 500, and then just bring that all into After Effects from there. Does that make sense for everybody? Yes.
It also helps that if, like, for some reason you change the timing of something near the end, and you say, okay, well, now I want it to look like that instead of having to render the whole thing, you can just render from where you changed that thing to the end.
Yeah, yeah, it's just way more flexible. I mean, it's how it's done, right? People in production houses are not sending MP4s back and forth, right? Even a PNG image sequence, we're compressing the data somewhat there, but you know, that's how people are working. You know, that's why we do it that way in 184, because it's the best way to do it. So do that. I know this seems like an extra step, but in that extra step in After Effects, you can also do some color correction. You could also speed up or slow down shots by a little bit, right? Not a ton, but you could definitely stretch or compress things a little bit in order to change the timing a bit. And yeah, that's what we want to do for this. The 640 by, for Monday's version, we'll say 640 by 360, and use the redshift low settings. And yeah, I would not go for avoid the big bang. Okay, now instead work in chunks, or sorry, not work, but let's say render in chunks. Where if you've got a couple shots ready, I would go home tonight and test render them overnight. And if they come out great, then good, you have them for Monday, and you can go in and do everything. What I would not do is work till Sunday, and then Sunday night be like, all right, time to hit render, and then figure out that, like, oh, it won't be rendered until February. Okay, so so working in chunks so that this helps, and that you are checking in with, like, am I actually going to be able to render this? And then also you can build it in After Effects that way, right? There's no rule that says you have to render the whole thing at one time. In fact, you should not try to render the whole thing in one pass. Sound good? Everybody understand the bit about the lights, right? So you want at least, this would be the most minimal light setup, right? Some sort of dome light and then a portal light. Those two go together. And you would have multiple portal lights if you have windows on both sides of your room, right? You would want to then also have a point light that's up at the top, probably tinted a little bit orange so that it looks like an inside light bulb. Sound good? And then Polyhaven is a good place you can grab some sort of outdoor scene to use as your, what you're seeing through the window. Yeah.
For the resolution for the downloads of the Polyhaven HDRIs, what, I guess, resolution would you recommend, 4K or 8K or?
I mean, yeah, I don't think. Artistically, I don't think that's going to make a big difference. However, I am not 100% certain the degree to which that affects the render time. So let's test it. I have the 4K in here now, and I'll just hit render as is and come over to Polyhaven. I can't imagine this would have a huge effect, but I've been wrong before. And here's, yes, Spockingen Hill. I believe this gentleman is German, which is why most of these are in German name. And so we'll get the 8K version. Yeah, so in this kind of offline rendering, this would be the only downside. Like, are you going to see a lot more detail in the outdoor scene? I don't think so. The 8K version, the 4K version was like 80 megabytes. The 8K version is like 300 megabytes. So there's like a just data size issue there. And when it does render, since this is a GPU renderer, I believe all of the textures are being loaded onto your graphics card RAM. So there's probably, I mean, we usually don't run up against that as far as like, I ran out of GPU RAM, and I'm not 100% certain, but I remember this used to be a bigger issue a few years ago, but I think a lot of these renders have been rewritten so that they can also pull stuff off of the regular computer memory. Although again, I'm not 100% certain. All right, and so here's the Schwarzingen Hill 8K. And I'll dump that in there. And most of you guys have some sort of reasonably new graphics card. So I mean, your graphics card has something along the lines of like at least 2 gigabytes-ish of VRAM. All right, so let's see now if I render with the exact same settings and just a different outdoor picture, whether we get much of a difference in time. It looks to be pretty even. And so this is another thing that's cool. You can grab one thing and say set as A, grab another thing and say set as B, and then it gives you this little thing. You can sort of slide back and forth between them. And
It doesn't seem to make much of a difference.
yeah, I mean, I'd be hard pressed to, I mean, if I didn't know what was going on, like, I don't know, they look the same. Unless you have like, your kitchen has some sort of like gigantic bay window in it of some kind.
Just stick with 4K?
Yeah, that seems fine. I mean, the render time seems comparable. Some of these are a little bit faster by a second, you know, but yeah, who knows? So yeah, 4K seems like plenty, giving you plenty of detail out the window. Cool. All right, well, we scientifically solved that problem. I mean, it seems like maybe it does. I mean, it has to access more data in memory, so that, I mean, that has to take time. So, but the degree to which that would actually be, I mean, it seems like a very incremental change, right? The problem with rendering is that the interfaces are designed in such a way that the sliders, they do very little without a bunch of pre-existing knowledge. They don't do a very good job of letting you know, like some of these boxes and sliders could affect your render time by like 2%. Like, I'll turn this thing up or turn it down. Whereas other ones could affect your render time by like an order of magnitude, right? You go from rendering in 1 minute to rendering in 1 to the 10th minutes, right? Which is, you know, whatever that is, 10,000 minutes, I don't know. And they do, like something that could, you know, thrash your render time like that, I think should be either hidden from you or, you know, they should make they should be organized in such a way that lets you know, like, you should know what you're doing before you, like, maybe you should get a pop-up, like, do you know what you're doing with this slider? Because if you don't, like, you should not touch it. Something like that. And so if we all just stick with the low settings at 640 by 360, that'll give us a chance to actually get a complete rough draft for Monday, so that we can say, because that is the more important thing, because then at that point we can incrementally step up the quality to the 1280 by 720, and then also figure out how much because the main thing is going to be, if you look at this, there'll definitely be at those settings, under the low settings, some noise. In the noise, when you're looking at the still image, isn't that, especially for the speed at which you're getting like this real-time render feedback, which is always really great. The problem is that in the animation, the noise turns into this, sort of animated noise, right? Mm-hmm. And so reducing that, there's a bunch of strategies for this, but that's going to be our primary concern, is not getting more pixels, but just sort of reducing our noise.
Would it be better to just reduce the noise in After Effects?
No. I mean, I think the amount of time and the last quality, like the After Effects noise reduction is not. I've only used it in a handful of instances. Like every time someone has come to me with like a video that would look like garbage, and they're like, "Can you fix this in After Effects?" Because that's what it does, right? It's like, I mean, I'm not great at it as far as denoising stuff, but like it makes it a little better. Like people think it's like you can take something shot with your $150 phone at night and make it look like it was shot with a 35mm camera during the day, right? And like that's not possible, right? You can make it look like it was shot with a $150 camera at night and make it look like it was shot with like a $210 camera at night, right? Like, so there's still noise, but maybe just slightly less. And so like, yeah, we do have the red giant stuff now for denoising, but in general, the type of denoising it's going to be able to do here, right, is going to be of a different kind, because it's denoising within the render system versus After Effects, which is just doesn't know anything about what it's actually looking at. It's just trying to like reduce the amount of color variation between pixels over time, right? And so the informed denoising in Redshift would almost certainly be better. But like I said, by far the most important thing is getting a complete rough draft, not getting too obsessed with the amount of noise in it right now. So thinking about the quality of your shots, remember, show the good stuff, right? Everything that you really put some time into, like a detail that you got into, that should definitely be in the video, right? You don't want to leave stuff on the field as far as like, oh, I spent a bunch of time modeling this and I don't even really see it. You want it to be in there. Sound good? Yeah, render the whole shot, Jose. And just, I don't have anything open. Give me a second here to sign in to After Effects. Just because I think Taryn hasn't done too much After Effects. Although we did this previously in the semester, didn't we?
Very briefly.
Very briefly. Usually people take 194 first, where you do this like constantly. So, but in this case, let's just review this, because the one thing you need to do in After Effects with your image sequence is make sure that so let me set some keyframes on this camera real quick here. How about here? There we go. We got keyframes. Let's see. What happens when I change that preset halfway through making a keyframe?